Hi, it's Tom with a technical look at Ni no Kuni 2, the much anticipated sequel from Level 5. Available on both PS4 and PC, it's deservedly turning heads for keeping to its signature Studio Ghibli visual style, where the character design and even a beautiful Joe Hisaishi score evoke some of the studio's greatest films. Seeing the PC version running at a full 3840 by 2160 here, with settings at maximum, it pulls off the aesthetic perfectly. The only catch is, of course, it's running at 60 frames per second. Now that stands out because it hasn't artificially dropped the frame rate in the way Dragon Ball FighterZ has, for example, where Arc System Works deliberately drop the frame rate to keep things consistent with the anime. Take Spirited Away as an example. Every on-screen element is drawn or looped at different rates, whether that's characters at 8 FPS, looped backgrounds at 12, or camera pans at the full 24 FPS. For a movie, it's not something that stands out when the target refresh is 24Hz after all, but for Ni no Kuni 2, 60 is what you get. The visual style is imitated to an extent, but it's not an all-in approach. And for the sake of it being a playable, fast-paced JRPG, it runs at that sky-high refresh on PC, PS4 and PS4 Pro for a reason. At least, depending on the intensity of the scene. More on that later. We'll get onto performance, but first, let's see how the visuals stack up. Now, whether you play on the standard PS4 or the Pro model, the feature set is largely the same, barring resolution. The regular PS4 gives you a 1920 by 1080 native resolution based on our initial tests, with only one cutscene showing something lower, at 1776 by 1000 or 92.5% on each axis. It suggests some scenes are adjusted for resolution on a base PS4, but on the whole, this is a 1080p rendition of the game. In terms of the graphical feature set, those cel-shaded characters translate across exactly as is, and it's just the clarity of their outlines that takes a hit next to a Pro running in 4K mode. In fact, turning to the PS4 Pro version, this is where things get a bit more interesting. There's both a 4K and a standard definition mode in the options menu, and a HDR toggle too if your TV supports it. The fact is, the 4K mode is running at 3200 by 1800 based on my tests, which marks a 2.7 times increase in pixel output from the machine compared to a regular PS4. So that in itself is a respectable turnout given the hardware at hand. Whereas, if you revert back to the standard definition mode, well, gameplay renders at 1080p from your PS4 Pro. Simple as that. In other words, PC is the only version capable of hitting a true 4K, but in all honesty, it takes a powerhouse PC to get there. Even the GTX 1080 Ti I'm running here had a difficult time holding 60 FPS at 4K once I started battling on the world map. So the fact PS4 Pro gets that close at 1800p is a respectable feat. Now, between the PS4 consoles, the visual feature set is otherwise the same. Texture work and shadows seem to run at the same setting here. The real comparison is between the Pro and PC at max settings, where it's obvious console users are missing out on a few neat extras. The first main difference you'll notice is image quality on PC. Now, it helps hugely there's no scaling involved at all across sharp character outlines, where PS4 Pro shows a faint blur by comparison. At a pure 3840 by 2160, PC avoids that scaling, but it also has a suite of quality anti-aliasing options to help it along. I'm running with SMAA T2X, a temporal pass that cleans those edges without adding too much blur and minimizing shimmer in motion. It's taxing on your GPU, but each 4K frame on PC is pristinely presented this way, almost living up to the image standard of the films. The only downside? Well, this mode adds a slight ghosting artifact behind moving edges. Tellingly, the PS4 Pro version shows this as well, but with fewer gradients behind the object in question. It's also less effective in general, suggesting PS4 Pros using the simpler TAA mode from PC. Side by side, there are a few other differences. I mean, check this out. The opening cutscene shows PC has added bloom on the lamp lights in this tunnel. It's just a toggle in the graphics menu, but a nice extra. Texture filtering and screen space ambient occlusion are also lower quality on PS4 Pro, but it's such a minor difference it really took close scrutiny of both to pick it out. Crucially, texture quality is identical between both consoles and PC, even if the presentation is blurrier at angles on PS4 machines. PC also sports high quality screen space reflections and motion blur, but the difference from the lower setting is minute. In practice, it makes it very difficult indeed to pick out any difference from the PS4 Pro version, especially so when considering the resolution and anti-aliasing differences, which have a bigger impact overall. Overall, the sense is that PC hands in the most authentic take of a Studio Ghibli animation in a modern game, insofar as the image quality goes. Taking into account the frame rates though, it's hard to overlook the PS4 versions when it comes to being optimized for their set resolutions. The goal is 60 FPS here, which to be fair is a rarity in the current climate of ambitious, technically cutting edge RPGs like The Witcher 3 or Final Fantasy 15. Ni no Kuni 2 really plays it simply and effectively with that cel-shaded style, and given the move to a fully real-time combat system, it makes sense to make 60 a target. Does every version get away with it though? Well, let's take the standard PS4 as an initial example here. A lot of the opening tutorial sections in the kingdom and through the sewers run flawlessly on all systems no matter what. It's just arriving to the open world map area that I started seeing the console choke up. We're not talking anything drastic, and drops below the 50 FPS line are as bad as it gets. But given how fluidly Level 5's engine runs up till that point, each of those drop frames sticks out. Panning the camera across the map, and even entering battles from here onwards, expect a range of 50 to 60 FPS on a regular PS4. Hands up here, this is a huge game by its nature. I simply haven't seen everything Ni no Kuni has to offer. It may get better or worse as you move through the adventure, and so this sample only represents the worst of the opening hours. But even so, it does at least put into perspective where a standard PS4 stands next to the enhanced Pro version and its two modes. For the next test, I figured I'd run through the same gamut of battles and world maps traipsing again on PS4 Pro. On the left is its SD mode and native 1080p, and on the right we're on the 4K mode, which is of course 1800p. And there is some success there. With this console you have the option to run at a perfectly smooth 60 FPS if you want to, but with image quality taking a hit to 1080p. If you want that, the so-called standard definition mode is the one for you. You'll simply be funneling PS4 Pro's GPU horsepower away from a high pixel count and towards locking that 60 FPS down. The 4K mode on the other hand, well, relatively speaking, it at least runs these sections at a slightly higher rate than a standard PS4. Memory bandwidth is the first culprit to consider when big effects cause drops like this. And so you have to wonder if 1800p was the best fit for PS4 Pro's 4K mode, given we are seeing drops to 50 FPS. The option to choose is at least in the user's hands though, and thankfully the 50 to 60 FPS range does tend towards the upper end of that in my experience. Overall then, the smoothest way to play the game on console is PS4 Pro in the curiously named standard definition mode. A straight locked 60 FPS is what you get there, and it suits the game's rapid pace like a glove. At least, provided you're happy to take that image quality hit. And while PC does get away with the best image quality of the bunch at a true 4K, with enhanced bloom and SSAO, it's a surprisingly taxing game on even a GTX 1080 Ti. Putting the drops to 50 FPS aside on PS4, the console versions hold up well enough in side-by-side comparison. And if the faint upscale blur at 1800p doesn't bother you, PS4 Pro offers a fine way to jump into a Studio Ghibli inspired universe.
Never mind who. The question is where?
Anyway, that's all from me. If you did find this quick look insightful in any way, please do give us a like or subscribe. And as a 4K video, it's also available on our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, along with an exhaustive archive of every other video we've produced. But until next time, thanks for watching.
Wait!
Hey,